All right, guys, I'm going to review our fractions review assignment part 2 now. The first question asked you to give an equivalent fraction for each of these fractions. So the first one was 1/3. So if I was using my fraction strips, I might actually look at the fraction strips and say, which one is the same size as 1/3? By the way, if you were doing that, you would find that 2/6 is the same size as 1/3. You can also use multiplication or division to find equivalent fractions. Now there is no number you can divide both 1 and 3 by, so you'd have to use multiplication. So if I was going to say, well, 1/3, if I multiplied the top by 5 and multiplied the bottom by 5, I would get 5/15, and that would be equivalent. Oops, not 15/5, 5/15. 4/10, if I was looking on my fraction strips, I would find that 2/5 is the same size as 4/10. You could also use division to find that same answer. 4/10, if I divide the top and the bottom both by 2, you'd see 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 2/5. If you used multiplication, like for example, if you multiply both by 2, you'd find that 8/20 is equivalent to 4/10, and that's a good answer too. 3/6. 3/6 is another one of those ones that you can use fraction strips for, division, or multiplication. There are many different ways you could do it. I'm going to use division. 3/6. If I divide the top and the bottom both by 3, 3 divided by 3 is 1, 6 divided by 3 is 2. So that's 1/2. So 1/2 is the same as 3/6. You see that same thing if you had used your fraction strips. If you used your fraction strips, you'd also find that 2/4 is the same size. You would find that 5/10 is the same size. You'd find that 4/8 is the same size. So there's a lot of fraction strips that would match that. If you were using multiplication, you might multiply the top and the bottom both by 2, and the 3 times 2 is 6. And 6 times 2 is 12, so 6/12 might be an answer that you got. The last one is 2/5. You cannot use division on this one. There's no number that you can divide both 2 and 5 by. So if you were using your fraction strips, you would find that 4/10 is the same size. If you're using multiplication, maybe you would have used 3 though. So let's multiply the top and the bottom both by 3. And 2 times 3 is 6. And 5 times 3 is 15. So 2/5 is the same thing as 6/15. So some different strategies for finding that answer. We have some sets here. I wanted you to go with the smallest to the largest, the least to greatest. So one thing we had talked about is when you're looking at the denominator, the bigger the number in the denominator, the more pieces it's been cut into. So in A, all of the fractions have a 1 in the numerator, so really we can just concentrate on the denominator. So 1/8 would be cut into the most pieces, so the pieces would be the smallest. So 1/8 would be the smallest. Then 1/6 would be the next smallest. 1/4 or 1/4 would be the next smallest, and 1/2 would be the largest of these. For number 2, all of the denominators are the same, so it's just looking at the amount of pieces you have. So 1/5 would be the smallest one, then 2/5, then 3/5, and then the largest would be 5/5, which would be actually a whole one. If a pizza was cut into 5 pieces and you ate 5 pieces, it means you ate one whole pizza. The second page, these ones are maybe a little bit trickier. I asked you to go from greatest to least. So what's the largest one? So for A, you'll notice that the numerator is all the same for these ones here too. So in this one, if you look at it, we'd only really have to look at the denominator. Now 5/5, I just talked about that one on the previous page. If you had a pizza cut into 5 pieces and you ate 5 pieces, it means you ate a whole pizza. So that would be the largest or the greatest of these fractions. The next would be 5/6. The next one would be 8s, 5/8. 8s are bigger than 10ths. And the smallest would be 5/10. 5/10, by the way, is the same as 1/2. It'd be like if you had a pizza cut into 10 pieces and you ate 5 of them, you ate half of a pizza. B in number 3 is probably the most difficult of them because it has different numerators and different denominators. So what I would do is I would make the denominators the same. So since this is eighths, what would it be if 3/4 was eighths? What would be equivalent to 3/4 except with eighths in the denominator? Well, I know I'd have to multiply by 2 to get 4 to be eighths. So that would mean I'd have to multiply the top by 2 also. 3 times 2 is 6. So this would be 6/8. And 1/2, well, in order to make the denominator 8, I would have to multiply the 2 by 4. So if 2 times 4 is 8, 1 times 4 is 4. So 4/8 and 1/2 are equivalent, but they're a lot easier to figure out now because now they all have the same denominator. So now I look at this, I'm looking for the greatest first, so 6/8 is the greatest, so that's equivalent to 3/4. And then 4/8 would be the next greatest, so that's equivalent to 1/2. 3/8 would be the next one, and the smallest would be 1/8. Last question. It says, Henry and David each ordered small pizzas at the restaurant. Henry's pizza was cut into 7 pieces, and he ate 4 of those pieces. David's pizza was cut into 8 pieces, and he ate 5 of them. Who ate more pizza? Explain your answer. So when I'm doing this question, I'm going to take a look at Henry's pizza and David's pizza. Now the thing about it is that they're cut into different sizes, and they eat different amounts. What's the same in them is how many they have left over. So Henry has 4/7 that he ate and 3/7 left over. David ate 5/8, and so that means he would have 3/8 left over. Now it makes it a little bit easier because if I look at 3 right here, they're both the same numerator, then I can see, well, 7ths would be bigger than 8ths. So since 7ths are bigger than 8ths, that means that, sorry guys, since 7ths are bigger than 8ths, that means Henry has more left over. So that means that David ate more. All right guys, I hope that helps. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again later.